On the morning of 4th July 1946, near the city of Gdańsk in Poland, an enormous silence covered the landscape. It was not a peaceful silence. It was heavy, tense, and filled with the memory of a war that had ended only months earlier, but still lived inside every witness standing there. Around 200,000 people gathered on a large open hill overlooking a secured execution site. Soldiers surrounded the entire area, controlling movement and maintaining strict order. Rows of gallows stood prepared in front of the crowd, forming a grim structure against the sky. There was no celebration, no joy, only stillness and anticipation. 11 convicted individuals were brought forward that day. They were former personnel connected to the Stutthof Concentration Camp, a place that had become a symbol of suffering, forced labor, and mass death during World War II. As the condemned were positioned, the crowd remained silent. Some looked away. Others stared forward without expression, as if trying to process the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Then the final signal was given, and history reached its breaking point. But this moment did not begin here. It began years earlier, inside a system where humanity slowly disappeared behind barbed wire. The story of Stutthof begins in 1939, immediately after the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany. Near the coastal region of Gdańsk, the camp was established as a temporary detention site for Polish civilians who were considered politically dangerous by the occupying regime. At its beginning, it was not classified as a major concentration camp. It was seen as a controlled facility meant to hold prisoners for short-term detention. But as the occupation expanded, so did the camp itself. More prisoners began arriving from different regions under German control. Polish citizens, Jewish families, Soviet prisoners of war, and other groups labeled as undesirable were transported into the system. With each new arrival, the camp grew more crowded, and conditions deteriorated further. Life inside Stutthof was defined by deprivation. Food was scarce and never enough to maintain health. Clean water was limited. Medical treatment was almost non-existent. Disease spread rapidly through overcrowded barracks where prisoners were forced to live in extreme conditions. Exhaustion became a permanent state. Prisoners worked long hours under strict supervision, often collapsing from physical collapse during labor. Those who could no longer work were not treated as individuals in need of help, but as expendable. As time passed, Stutthof expanded into a network of subcamps. Prisoners were sent to factories, agricultural zones, and construction sites, where forced labor supported the broader war effort. Every part of the system was designed around extraction maximum labor with minimum survival. The camp gradually transformed from a detention site into a structured system of control where human life had been reduced to function alone. Each day followed a fixed cycle of roll calls, forced labor, punishment, exhaustion, and uncertainty. Prisoners never knew whether they would survive the next day, the next hour, or even the next selection. Hope slowly disappeared inside the camp's boundaries. As World War II reached its final stage, the entire structure around Stutthof began to collapse. The Eastern Front was breaking apart under the advance of Soviet forces. German-controlled territories were shrinking rapidly, and panic spread throughout the Nazi administration. Orders became desperate, and evacuation plans were rushed into action. Inside Stutthof, this collapse turned into chaos. Thousands of prisoners were forced into long evacuations known as death marches. These marches lasted for days or even weeks, often through freezing conditions and broken terrain. Prisoners were given almost no food, no proper clothing, and no medical care. Anyone who could not continue walking was often left behind. Some were executed on the spot. Others simply disappeared during the journey, their fate never recorded. At the same time, internal control of the camp was still maintained by remaining SS personnel and female guards assigned to oversee prisoner discipline. These women were often very young, sometimes barely out of adolescence, yet they were placed into positions of authority over thousands of prisoners. Their responsibilities included supervising barracks, conducting roll calls, enforcing discipline, and managing daily camp operations. Survivors later described the environment as completely unpredictable. There was no stability, no safety, no protection. Punishment could come at any time, for any reason, or for no reason at all. Prisoners were beaten, humiliated, and forced to continue working even when physically broken. Exhaustion was not accepted. Collapse was not excused. Survival depended entirely on circumstance. As 1945 arrived, the camp system collapsed completely. Food supplies ended. Transport became disorganized. Communication broke down. Prisoners were moved in overcrowded trains, boats, and forced marches under horrific conditions. Many died before ever reaching another destination. When Soviet forces finally entered the region in May 1945, they found ruins instead of an operational camp. Buildings were destroyed or abandoned. Evidence of mass suffering was visible everywhere, and only a small number of survivors remained alive, hidden, weak, and barely surviving. But the most important phase was still ahead, because survivors began to speak. And their testimonies revealed the full reality of what had taken place inside Stutthof. After the war ended, Polish authorities launched formal investigations into crimes committed at Stutthof. Special tribunals were created to reconstruct events, gather evidence, and identify those responsible for the operation of the camp system. Survivors were called into courtrooms to testify. Their accounts were detailed, emotional, and consistent. They described starvation, forced labor, physical abuse, selections for death, humiliation, and constant psychological terror. Many described how survival depended not on rules, but on chance and the mood of those in authority. The accused included former SS officers, administrative workers, and female guards who had served during the final phase of the camp. Many attempted to defend themselves by claiming they were following orders or had limited responsibility. However, the court focused on individual actions and behavior inside the system. Witnesses described beatings, participation in selections, enforcement of punishments, and direct involvement in actions that led to prisoner deaths. As evidence accumulated, the conclusion became unavoidable. Stutthof operated through a combination of centralized orders and individual participation at every level. Eventually, the trials reached their conclusion. Several defendants were found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to death. On 4th July 1946, those sentences were carried out in public. Thousands gathered once again, not in celebration, but in silence and reflection. The executions were controlled, formal, and final. Each moment represented the end of years of investigation, testimony, and legal process. But even after this, the story did not end. In later decades, former camp personnel continued to be identified. Some had lived ordinary civilian lives for years before their involvement was discovered. These later cases proved that accountability for such crimes does not disappear with time. It may take years, but it eventually returns. Today, Stutthof remains one of the most powerful reminders of World War II and the systems it created. It is not just a place in history. It is a warning embedded in time itself. A warning about how systems can slowly turn into machines of control. A warning about how obedience can replace morality. And a warning about how silence can allow suffering to continue without resistance. The story of Stutthof is not only about what happened during the war. It is about how easily humanity can be reshaped under pressure, ideology, and fear. Even decades later, its memory continues to exist not as distant history, but as a lesson that still speaks today. Because some stories are not meant to be forgotten. They are meant to remind the world of what must never happen again.